We are here live today with my latest guest, Renee T. Bavineau. Renee has worked for decades in, although she's, still going strong, unlike me. I've worked for decades in my industry. You have worked for decades in the fashion industry, which sounds stylish and exciting to a lot of us, but for those of us who care about the entire planet and everything on it, the fashion industry, I think most of us vaguely know, has some problems, both in terms of labor and in terms of our planet. So Renee, why are you here? Like, what's your passion, and what can you tell us about how we can change?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. You know, I've been a fan of the Elephant Journal and you for a long time. I grew up in the apparel business, my family's business in Boston. I've been making clothes since I'm 6 years old.
Wow.
And, went to FIT, Fashion Institute, and have been working in industry ever since. 19 years ago, by a prompt of my son, who was 6 years old at the time, I started my own business. Raise the Bar was born.
Love it. How did your son prompt you?
I'll show you. I was working full time at FIT.
Yeah.
And I was consulting for Land's End in Wisconsin. And
Nice.
I was a single mom, like you and your mama. And he made me this poster.
Oh.
And it said, "Mom, I really love you. I don't want you to go to Wisconsin."
Oh.
So I quit. I quit my fat corporate jobs and teaching, and I started my own business. And since then, it's been an evolving practice, launching brands, helping. At the core of my expertise is fit and sizing. So I've been helping brands, legacy brands, billion-dollar brands, small startups, all of them, in launching their own apparel brands. Lots of it made in USA, but 6 years ago-ish, I was at a industry invitation-only C-suite forum in New York City. And they were talking about the future and their initiatives. And long story shorter, at the end, someone asked the room, "Where do you stand on sustainability?" And so some dude stood up and said, "We can't afford to be sustainable." This is 2017. Mm-hmm. And me, being the shy girl that I am, I couldn't help myself. And I stood up and I was like, "Dude, you can't afford not to be sustainable. You can't just show up in 5 years and be sustainable." So it's the same thing, the same way I feel about fit and sizing.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's connect the dots on that a little bit, because I feel like half my friends kind of think of themselves as like outdoorsy and active, and they're buying Patagonia and Birkenstocks and whatever, but they don't really care about or know much about the effect of, say, Patagonia, which we think of as an environmentally responsible brand.
Yep.
And I'm curious about that, because last I checked, like 99% of what they make is plastic made overseas. And they are transparent. They do fund a lot of cool environmental stuff. I love Yvonne Chouinard.
Yeah.
I love the people I've known at Patagonia. But the whole outdoor industry seems kind of exploitative of nature.
Yep.
And then on the other hand, I have friends who are wearing, slinky, beautiful dresses and, fast fashion and, beautiful suits. And that whole side of it seems even further than what I just described, where sustainability seems like a weird kind of concern, like not even a relevant concern. And yet all of us, Republicans, Democrats, fashionistas and outdoorsy people, are living on this planet. Our children are going to have to live on this planet. What is so bad about fashion? I guess, very simple, big question. What's so bad about fashion for our planet?
Yep. So in the big picture, The clothes that we are making, the industry, are making, do not fit today's American consumer. Okay, not for fit and sizing, the population, so the industry is still building, making clothing against a legacy standard and practice.
So yeah, I failed to ask about the fit and sizing part of that. So, and then how is fit and sizing so relevant to unsustainability or sustainability?
Well, so when clothes don't fit the population, and consumers are forced to, force is on the table, to buy multiples of something to get the piece that fits them. So they'll buy a 6, 8, and a 10, in hopes that it fits,
Right.
So then the returns is the biggest chunk of money on the table. And the returns are ruining the planet.
Why are returns so bad for the planet?
Well, think about the cost, the true cost of one return. So today, for example, there are people that are claiming, consumers that are claiming that I can't afford to buy, regular, sustainable fashion, right? I can only buy fast fashion. Yet they're on TikTok doing hauls. I don't know if you know what hauls are. So they buy a bunch of clothes online, a bunch, and then they do these videos and they're trying it on and then and returning it. And so,
so they get a whole bunch of clothing, they try it all on, which makes for a fun video, and then they return 85% of it.
So the industry and the consumer are like pushing the $12 cost of shipping back and forth on the table. Like, who owns it,
Right.
Yeah.
And then, the shipping is in plastic. Like, I remember, so just, you'd be proud of me, I guess, yesterday, as the publisher of Elephant Journal, I get approached by sustainable brands all the time, and the sustainable brand does organic and I think some fair labor, and they were going to send me a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah.
Like a terry cloth organic robe and this and that, like nice stuff, and all for free. Sounds good, right?
Right.
And of course, me being as annoying as I am, I said, is it possible to make sure this is shipped with like paper tape and not in plastic and all that? And they're like, sorry, everything we do is shipped in plastic. So, so we're not going to do it. So I've been shocked. Anyone who's ever bought on, say, J. Crew or something, you get like 40 plastic bags, all of which none of that existed even 40 years ago. It was like wax paper or newspaper or brown paper or whatever it would be packed in, right? Yeah. So, and then the shipping has a carbon footprint, especially if it's made overseas, right? That's epic.
Anywhere. Funny if I could interject here. In 1990, on Earth Day 1990 or 91, I used to canoe to work.
Nice.
From Jersey City to town, the Garment Center. And my boyfriend at the time worked down on Wall Street. So coming back, and we used to tie up at Chelsea Piers, coming back to Jersey in the eve, we would see the garbage barges, and me being me, like I grew up with this loathe of waste, would just visualize all the poly bags, the plastic bags, because I was a technical designer. So I knew all day long, each little technical designer in the building was taking a new garment with a new poly bag and throwing it in the trash. And at that time, I only was thinking about throwing it in the trash. I wasn't even thinking about the plastic. That was 1990, and we're still doing that.
Every day, the garbage badges.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess, just to keep it super simple, like, why does that matter? Like, I think 99% of my friends, like I was saying, don't really, we're buying new plastic clothes that are wrapped in plastic and shipped with plastic fueled, petroleum fueled barges. Why is all this so bad? Like, who cares?
Well, it's destroying the planet. And,
Right.
Seth Godin, in his many messaging is to everybody, is like, think about first, if you can, what the planet needs, and then back it up into your process, your needs, whether you're a consumer or the brand. Like, in my opinion, everyone needs to, get in the huddle and take responsibility. Like, my wish is to put everyone on a timeout right now, a big fat timeout, stop making new plastic and fabric just for a little bit and figure it out.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
There's this famous.
While rebuilding the new system, because the system needs to be rebuilt. But like Carmen mentioned last week, we've done this before. We've made sustainable, organic food and clothing. We have done this before. So I know it's overwhelming to everybody. This whole thing is overwhelming. So the first thing everyone wants to do is avoid, and hope that Patagonia's present gift to the planet is going to take care of it. It's just like, that is an amazing gift, but we all need to show up,
Amen. I love that. It's almost like in the pandemic when we stopped all the systems and we had this brief 2-month moment of quarantine. We need like a quarantine for fast fashion.
Well, yeah, it's like, don't let a crisis go to waste. We have how many crises in the last 3 years? It's like, and they're not going to go away. They're not going to go away. This is on us, Yeah.
Well, you'll be proud of me. I'm looking at what I'm wearing, and I think like 90% of it is vintage. I mean, vintage has got to be better, right?
Oh, so let me mention that. So, repurposing, thrifting, resale, all that is wonderful. Don't get me wrong, but those items, the items that we're still making and over making, don't fit today's population. Today's population, and I'm speaking about women right now, 70% of the population is size 16, 18 and above. We're still fitting to like the girls down here,
So explain that for the idiots in the room. So 70%, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Of American women are size 16 and up.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on who you ask, how you do the math, how.
But this is a relative discussion.
Yeah.
So 70% of the real American women are not being designed for.
Right.
Are not being served.
And then the brands, I don't know if you are aware of, for example, and I'm not beating up on or whatever, anybody, I commend the Gap for their attempt for body quality. I've written about it, but it was a huge miss. And then they pulled the plug on it. And there's many other brands that I've worked for, because I've worked for Gap and everyone else, that, tap their toe into the plus or extended sizes, inclusion, blah, blah, blah. But then they pulled back. And so at the end of the day, what's really going on is the KPIs, key performance indicators, the math and the metrics need to change, because the consumer is saying she can't afford, the brands and the supply chain is saying they can't afford. I promise you, Waylon, I guarantee, if Oprah would have asked me what I know we can make apparel to fit the population of any age and any size and be sustainable and profitable at the same time. But it's not going to happen unless the system changes and we engage the consumer, the supply chain, and the brands.
Amen. I feel like clapping after everything you say. So my mom, whenever I walk around Halifax in Canada with my mom,
Linda,
like an old environmentalist at this point, she says, if I were mayor of Halifax, if I were queen of Halifax, and then she talks about what she would change in a more sustainable way. So if you were queen of or mayor of fast fashion or of the entire fashion industry, How
So,
would you make that more sustainable, that
yeah,
that
so,
circular system?
yeah, so one of my solves proposed, which I've written about, is the industry needs to hold accountable. They have to fill the missing seat at the table and reset the table. And the table being the C-suite, they need a function that is 100% accountable and rightfully accountable for the fit, which is attached to the apparel, and returns. Period. The end. It's not going to change. Because historically, the function responsible for fit and sizing has been, way down over here in the organization. So the organizations need to go from hierarchical to circular, and then change the roles and accountability.
I feel like you're describing that graphic we've all seen like 80 times about, an environmental worldview, and it's like all the living beings, including human beings, are equal on the planet. And then the sort of patriarchal worldview, which is sort of top down.
Yeah.
Like, so make the fit and sizing part of the process, and make returns. What would you do about returns?
Responsible. No, so if you have a C-suiter, okay, responsible for the product and is helping.
And a C-suite are just for people who aren't business types.
Sorry.
CEO, CFO, the executive.
Yep. So that doesn't exist. So today we have, some companies are putting in, and then no one's malintended. It's just never been done before in this way, right? So, so we've kind of let go of the engineering of apparel, because we outsourced it all. So I feel we need to bring that back to the brands side, right, and own it, and have that function responsible to be the go-to in how to design, develop, and produce with today's consumer in mind, with the planet in mind, and from that organically, really redefine the system, and really though, Waylon, I know it can sound, and it has sound, because I get pushed back all the time, because I don't, my proposals don't fit into the box, because listen, it's human nature, right? That we want it to be like the way it was, we want it the regular way, the old way. And quite honestly, it's not going to be that way again. But we can definitely take from the past, and break it down, chunk it down, to speak to. We need therapy. We need therapy, and just like in couples therapy and family therapy, we need the consumer, the brands, supply chain in the same room, and sustain that relationship, and be transparent, and stop, debating, instead educate.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, this is super interesting. So I'm someone who, without a great deal of education like yourself, I'm always trying to support eco or mindful brands made in USA. Like, I like Filson, I like whoever, but a lot of these legacy brands, if that's what they're called, LL Bean, a lot of them are constantly going through this thing where they get investment, they kind of sell out to the man, they start pushing their brand, and then they start very quietly making everything overseas.
Yeah.
I've seen that with Pendleton, and now they're making like plastic, this and that made in China. Like, Pendleton designed mugs made in China.
Yeah.
And you're like, that design is a Native American design. And historically, a great part of Pendleton was working with the Native American blanket heritage and benefiting the Native American education.
Yeah.
That's all gone out the window. And LL Bean makes their tote bag and what else in Maine. So I guess, like, how do we bring stuff back so it actually
So,
starts flowing
yeah,
backward into a more ethical, like made in America, made locally, engineering in the company, like you were saying?
yeah. So I'm in the network for the AAPN, America's Apparel Producers Network. Um,
Cool. I'm
and
asking the right person.
yeah, and there's a huge want to bring it back home, but there's a whole lot of fixing we need to do and prep to do that, because
Yeah.
that, shifting it back, in order for that to be sustainable, we really need, no matter where the production is, it doesn't matter where the production is, what the product is, whatever, in the whole big scheme of things, it all needs to be reset, right?
Right.
So I just give it a little example, but I hold everyone accountable, and this is just who I am. I hold up the mirror first to me, and that's my ask of everybody,
Yeah.
the brands and consumers, right? But for example, one of my greatest gigs was I was contracted to head up fit empowerment for a big billion-dollar legacy brand, and so I just it was my own creation, right? So it was amazing. Engaged the supply chain, consumers, and focus groups, whatever. Anyway, so I think it was like my second so-called tech talk. And, I'm there for fit and sizing. And so I had this big team of people listening to my tech talk. And all I did, kind of like Carmen too, is like, I just showed a couple of pictures of the garbage, the Great Island, Plastic Island, whatever it's
Right.
called, forgetting a Pacific, whatever.
Pacific Garbage Patch.
The seahorse with the Q-tip in his hand, and it was like silence in the room. They're like, what the heck does this have to do with fit and sizing?
Right.
And I'm like, well, it does and it doesn't, so we're so lacking in the front end, really. And again, no one's fault, but that's what really needs to happen, is in the front end
Yeah.
of the brands to, look and listen, just listen and understand, and stop and pause and give themselves permission to do things differently, and try not to, and it's so hard, I know, try not to like put everything in a box, and give yourself permission, and the leaders need to give the teams permission to do differently, and be, the other big thing that I wanted to share is, have an owner's mindset. I've preached that for years because that's how I was raised. But I realized, if you've never been an owner, or if you weren't taught how about money, you don't know what that means. So I think it's on us to, explain without shame and blame, the true cost of X, Y, and Z, and what if we were to, so we're making all these clothes that fit a demographic that is the minority today, right? So it's like, stop telling me we can't afford to fit a plus person when you're discounting and burning all the inventory, yeah, I can go on for days, as you can tell already, but
No, I mean, it's, I feel the same way. As sometimes you feel like you're shouting into the wind and people don't, it's like they're even a step away from caring. It's not that they're bad people, but
yeah,
the existing system, like, people are always like, look, I have to shop on Walmart or Amazon because it's cheaper. And I say, well, they gutted your local community, meaning there's worse jobs and worse pay. And that's why we're in this poverty mentality. If we could bring factories back, like in the 40s, 50s, with strong unions, everyone's making a good income, then you can afford to buy not extravagant stuff, but good local made union apparel.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
So
sad about the demise of the rather corrupt American Apparel, because they had that idea of vertical integration and
Yeah.
paying people well and all that, but they had their own issues. And,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, we have great suppliers here. You know, another thing is like, what I try to do is I make the case. I make the case for the brands, the consumer and the planet. So sometimes, you know, with, I hate to talk about them, but Shein, you know.
mhm.
So I have learned of some of my circle that are of age with income, you know, and they're buying Shein.
And Shein, for those who don't know, is this mega huge fast fashion, much bigger than H&M or any of that stuff, right?
Oh, yes. And
And they're kind of the worst. They're like the worst
it's
actors in this
toxic,
place.
yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, listen, but there's lessons to be learned from Shein, you know,
Yeah.
Shein, whatever. There's lessons
Yes.
to be learned. So I take that as a challenge, you know, and I want to
Yeah.
help my industry, you know, like, okay, I'm not supporting them either. Like, I know, Waylon, you and I feel the same way about Amazon and some other things, you know, but I don't hate on my peeps that use it, because everyone has their own reasons and whatevers. But so what I want to ask is, you know, for you that buy fast fashion, no matter who it is, you know, do you have the same expectations of a $70 dress that you have of a $7 Shein dress? You know, like, do you have the same expectation of a $1 bodega coffee in New York City as a $7 barista
Right.
bevy, you know? And, you know, everyone has their choices and blah, 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 but just, you know, stop and pause and ask yourself that, you know, because you know, there's so much on the table now, like literally in the last 48 hours about Shein, like with the toxins and like off the charts, you know, and we can continue, like, there's so many trolls that push back and argue and debate and like, oh, but this, whatever. And what I'm saying is like, we got to stop debating and look at, you know, what's really going on, and just stop and pause. And, you know, for that same $7 versus $70, do you kind of close your eyes to the reality of the ingredients? You know, like, let's ask people to protest and insist upon, you know, an ingredients label for apparel, you know. Stop buying it, we'll stop making it, you know.
Yeah. And there's the privilege piece, obviously, which, you know, we're ignoring when we're buying Shein. We're ignoring the fact that like 80% of the damage they're doing to people in our environment is usually to vulnerable communities overseas, is kind of out of sight, out of mind. We as the consumer agree not to look or think about it. And then the good news, I'll say this as a vegan, is when you do look and you feel that pain of seeing what you're causing when you're eating meat or, you know, consuming fast fashion, is you begin to care if you keep looking. And when you care, suddenly you can start living more ethically. And, you know, I was raised by a single mom, like you mentioned, and we wore a lot of thrift stuff. Like, you can wear cool stuff. I think there was just a vintage like festival or fair in New York City like recently.
And now it's cool to have hand-me-downs, or, you know. Yeah.
And, you know, like this jacket I'm wearing has been around for at least a couple generations.
Oh my God, this is a men's, actually, Maurice Malone. This was handmade by him in 2008. I would show you, but he hand signed it on the inside.
Wow.
Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's like freaking, like, it's like, I'm so attached to my, you know, like,
exactly.
when it's meaningful, you know. Yeah.
That's what Yvonne Chenard of Patagonia has said, pushing back, like talking about, let's stop debating. When people are always calling Patagonia Patagucci, he was like, what we want is that you don't buy a lot of our products, that you buy our stuff, you maintain it, we'll help fix it, we'll even take it back if you rip it up.
Yeah.
And that you have these like 8 or 12 or whatever, 20 things for
Yeah.
your whole life, or at least for 40
Yeah,
years.
like Eileen Fisher does that too.
I worship Eileen Fisher. I love her.
Yeah, so I was at this Health and Wealth of the Planet forum September 20th at City Winery. It was freaking phenomenal. Seth Godin was the keynote, and every single presentation, not salesy at all. All these people were all for the planet. It was incredible.
So let's take that inspiration. Who are a few brand? I mean, I'm sure you're ready for this annoying question, but like on a takeaway level, anyone who watches this video and still inspired by this stuff, who do we support? What do we support? How do we start changing the kind of supply demand here?
So right now I think that, I've connected with a lot of people on TikTok, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the fit and sizing space. And there's a lot of women there ranting, squawking, saying, see me, like fit for me, blah, blah, blah. And they're not really being heard by who they need to be heard by, and that's a problem. That's a problem. And then on the brand side, they're trying to listen, or I think they're listening or paying it or doing the right thing by way of technology, which I'll touch on if you want in a second, but by also social media, excuse me. So, but who on the brand side is looking and listening to the consumer on social media? And with that information, where does it go? It's not really being, well, so I feel like, oh my God, like, listen, I was raised in Boston, was in the 3rd grade during forced busing, so I feel like this is like a rebirth of that. Like it's very similar, inflation and whatever, like this disruption and whatever. I feel like we need a march, and a polite, appropriate. Like I engage with influencers on TikTok, and I'm trying to work with them, but I'm like, dude, you're going to, if we're going to work together, you need to represent all humans and the planet, and just be authentic, and just keep on saying what you want, how it feels, and stand by that. Like, so there's an argument on the table within industry, and it concerns the makers, if you will. So they're, supposedly Gen Zs, which I own an amazing Gen Z, Gen Zs claim they want to be sustainable and made in USA and the whole 9 yards, right?
Sorry, is Gen Z a brand?
Generation Z.
Oh, but what do you mean you own a Gen Z? Oh, like your child?
Son.
Oh, okay. I was confused. I was like, I know Gen Z, the generation, but then you said you own one.
This is what I said at the beginning. Like, this is so awesome that our two worlds are really like, it's funny. Yeah. Anyway, where is it going with this?
So Gen Z, TikTok.
Yeah. So
protest.
What's happening is that they're being very vocal and visual.
Yeah.
And then the brands are like trying to like figure stuff out and like come out of COVID coma and all that stuff, but they're not getting in bed together. They need to get in bed together. They need to get in therapy, and sustain it, and honestly, in my vision is to really have the consumer be part of the organization, in a authentic and transparent way, you know?
So do you feel fundamentally like, is fast fashion, including the size, if fast fashion reformed because of a big protest movement in terms of returns somehow, and in terms of fit and sizing, is fast fashion inherently like original sin, or is it reformable?
Yeah, no, it is. And honestly, I feel like fast fashion makers need to be part of this conversation and education too. Like, I want to talk to Shein, dude, and be like, hey, do you understand what's going on here? Da, da, da.
Well, they do though, but I believe they do, but they're not dumb, but they just don't care, because the promise of fast fashion is I can create 1,200 articles of clothing, throw them at you, see what sticks, and then do 1,200 more the next season, isn't it?
But I feel strongly that the so-called sustainable brands, meaning everyone opposite of fast fashion, just to summarize, that they can offer fashion or clothing, sustainable clothing that fits, and they can do it in a fast way if they break down the process. Like I was saying before, it's like take a pause, look at the whole process and break it down, and eliminate this and this in the front end.
Yeah. Well, that's the promise, like, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the promise of vertical integration, something like American Apparel.
Yeah.
You know, they're doing everything in-house. Like, again, forget their corruption and all that kind of down them. But if you're doing everything in-house and you have a great idea, or like fast fashion does, you steal a great idea, then you can get it to market rapidly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's makers here, you know, doing the so-called dirt to shirt model, you know,
like farm to rack.
Yeah, TS Designs, one of our buddies, and they have an amazing story and process, and they're transparent about it. But I also know that there's the mindset and the functions, the legacy ones, that question, you know, is that scalable? I do believe in the big picture, sustainable can be scalable, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but
it that needs to be the title of like an article.
Yeah,
sustainable.
Actually, that is one of my many titles.
I love it.
Yeah, but you know, they need to have an owner's mindset. They need to reset the whole thing.
Yeah,
and be transparent, and define, like, talk about what those mean, because you know, one of the many lessons I learned in doing what I do, especially in the last 5 to 6 years, and when I would come across large teams of billion-dollar companies, and I would just say, like, you know, do it differently, or, you know, do a workaround.
Yeah.
You know, your permission, and they didn't understand. So I realized, like, you know what, they really want and need the script, even if the script can change, you know. So that's where I used to get mad, you know, and sad. And then when I realized, I was like, you know what, these guys, they need to understand, you know, like in another big picture thing, Jen Sincero, the badass, is that my generation definitely, like, and still, I feel like we don't teach our kids about sex and money, you know, the biggest things. So it's the same thing. It's just like, let's break it down into chunk it down, you know, and show everybody's responsibility to it, and what it really costs, and what it really makes, and kind of, you know, with empathy, you know.
I feel like that's why I invited Carmen on. I was so impressed with her kind of bait and switch thing, which I've seen many times over the decades, but I really felt like her switch was genuine. Like when she gave all this facts and these kind of nerdy, scientific, resourced facts for people who don't know what we're talking about, we can put a link on the video or in the caption to conversation with this sort of eco activist model lady.
Yeah. So to that point, because it was so funny because I think I told you that I was just going on a random walk and checked in on your podcast and was like, holy crap, you just started up again. Anyway, so
we're back, baby.
I know, it's so awesome. So it's like, so at that Health and Wealth of the Planet, we were all given the Carbon Almanac, and I can't even tell you, this is, have you seen it? Heard of it? You have to, I mean, honestly, I feel like everybody, every family, every human needs this book, including little kids. Like, it is so well done. It is like, it's a gift.
Well, why don't one of the multi-billionaires at the sustainable event that you're talking about, like Eileen Fisher, she's such a good person. She's done well. Yeah. Pay for like 10,000 of these to go to schools.
Well, they gave these out and they gave as many as
but we need a lot more, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. And that's the thing is take one, share one, gift one, which I've been doing.
Like you were saying about sex and food or whatever, money. Like we need to have education about our effect on our planet that we are fully dependent on in schools everywhere.
Yeah.
So many people, especially sort of like MAGA bros who I run into on social media are like, I feel wonderful and warm in my toxic masculinity when I'm destroying the planet or when I'm murdering an animal.
Yeah.
Like I put some reel up about some princess truck, as I call them, like a fancy truck that's never done any work.
Yeah.
Idling on Pearl Street. And they were like, what's wrong with idling? Idling's awesome. Like, go to hell. Why do you care? It's none of your business. And I'm like, well, it's literally the air we breathe. I had asthma when I was a kid. Like, don't you care about children? Don't you care about like your children?
Yeah. So this, Waylon, seriously, like I feel like all I want, like I have an alarm on my phone to post every day something from this, just like for your, like this is, it's not too late. Yours is, it's never too late. Same kind of concept, to be honest.
Hey, look at that. I didn't put that together.
And it's fact checked and footnoted and pictures, and it explains everything. It's phenomenal. So what was I gonna say? Oh, so I also mentored some kids in my former town where I raised my son in the STEM project, and they came to me for it, right? For the sustainability piece. And I had this second grader, Shane Lim. He was phenomenal. So I'm saying, like, besides all that we're talking about, and we adults, I'm talking about 13 and older.
Yeah.
To do all that we're asking, right? Like, just, stop and think about it. Like, challenge your kids, to teach us. So anyway, this kid, Shane, they're so vulnerable and raw and whatever. I swear, give this book to any of these kids and they will start challenging, the parents, neighbors, teachers. This needs to be incorporated into after school activities, a while, like this has, we can't protect our kids from this unless we involve them.
I like that. Yeah, I feel often frustrated with the Gen Z and Gen, QYX or whatever, because, every single kid event I ever see is drowning in plastic. There's this myth that I think is super unhealthy that is perpetuated by like middle-aged people feeling guilty. Yeah. And they say, you know what? The kids are all right. The kids will fix everything. The kids will save the planet. To me, that is like copping out. Like, we have messed stuff up. They are going to mess stuff up unless they get a different education and different inspiration. Yeah. And they do have that idealism, but so should we. Yeah. And we all need to work together. Every generation, every gender, every skill set.
And it's
Let me
quite
ask
honestly-
that one question though, again, just because it's a nice takeaway. Are there any brands specifically, they could be legacy, they could be some, you know, vaguely accessible, affordable, sustainable brand that you would want people out here to, who are watching, to support, to check out?
Oh, I mean, there
I know
are,
it's a tough question. Yeah.
I mean, TS Designs is a great one. Kitsbow, KITSBOW,
Okay.
made in USA. Everlane, I'm sure, I think you spoke about it. Everlane?
Who?
Everlane?
Oh, I don't know if I know Everlane, but yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a short list.
Yeah, it is. I mean, listen,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that everyone's bad.
No.
I just feel like every brand can do better, and
Yeah.
every human can do better.
Yeah, a couple I like, they're far from perfect, but Darn Tough Socks, Filson, Christy Dawn, which is vaguely expensive, but pretty darn inspiring. There's a super small woman-owned brand here in Boulder that makes towels that I'm in love with called Lava Linens. And check them out. They're so inspiring.
There is another one, Your something, and she's by you, I think. She's somewhere.
Well, if you can't remember, we can put it in the caption if you think.
Yeah. I'll definitely follow up with that.
And then Pact. Do you know Pact? They're I think made in India, but it's organic cotton, and they're pretty awesome. And they're quite affordable. PACT.
Yeah. And to that point, like,
And vintage.
yeah, vintage. But you know, that's another scary thing is, you know, the old school of thrifting, you know, like now there's you know, there's huge opportunity for people to get into that business, but it's a mess. It's like so much. And now Shein is actually into the resale, like, don't even get me started. So it's really hard, you know, and
no, I know vintage is getting corrupted like everything else. It's becoming like a fast fashion, you know, sort of Filene's basement.
dumping ground.
Yeah.
Hey, I used to work in Filene's basement.
Hey. The famous Filene's basement was in Boston back in the day. Very famous.
Yeah, my aunt, my dad, and my grandmother all worked there too. Yeah.
We're a real Boston family.
I'm telling you, I was born into this industry on Labor Day.
I love it. Wow. Well,
Said.
please, thank you so much for being here. Please come back.
Oh my God, I will.
You've been amazing. Like really, I mean that. Come back and write articles, and let's try to get that almanac, the carbon almanac, out to people. Tell Eileen or someone to fund. School.
Yeah, no, that would be awesome. Thank you. I really, really appreciate this.
I appreciate it. What a gift.
Yeah.
Renee, thank you.
Yep. Thanks, dude. Ciao, ciao.